What happens when healthy relationships are potentially the most triggering? And more importantly, how do we navigate going about dealing with triggers that are exposed when encountering healthy individuals, creating healthy relationships? It's gonna be a good one.
This is why the happiest and healthiest relationship you've ever been in might also feel the most triggering. As a quick background, every day we try to take turns answering a question that helps us grow as a couple. And last night, I reflected on all the times those triggers almost made me walk away. I genuinely was so close to walking away so many times. And it wasn't because you and I weren't compatible. It was because this was a no kind of relationship and a space that demands transparency and vulnerability. And in that space, there was nowhere that I could hide. Everything that I was avoiding working on, all the parts of myself was pretending weren't there, they showed up, and I didn't like what I saw, and I tried to run. The most important skill someone can learn is how to discern when you feel anxiety and stress and fear. Is that because they're making you feel that way unjustly, or do you feel that way because they're natural things to feel, that fear, that anxiety, given what you've been through? And it's just an emotional response to the opportunity to grow.
Ooh, smoke that.
So what was it, Sean, for you that really resonated with you?
Yeah, man. So I was, there's a few things. So number one, having a healthy relationship compared to what could be perceived as the most triggering, most triggering and healthy. That does not seem to be something that combines really well to a first thought and first way of thinking. So there was that. That's what really caught my attention. There were certain responses and triggers that were brought out from somebody who is healthy and whole. So somebody she's encountered that is loving her at a different space, different level, something she's never seen before. Her first reaction was to run, look for an exit, not because it was him or his fault or anything he's doing that's unjust. It was because it was revealing a lot of what was in her that she didn't like. Is it because they're making you feel this way unjustly, or is it because of what's happened in your past that has now created this immediate response? In this culture today, specifically in a Gen Z culture, a lot of narratives that are being created on the backs of looking for an early exit. Because we do that, we don't sit down enough to get to understand perspectives like that and why it could work, why there's work that needs to be involved, hard work that's necessary, patience that's necessary to cultivate these things. There's a lot of people that are struggling in these areas, but because we're too busy being upset that somebody hasn't answered and has went a whole day without talking to us, so we don't stay around because you just went a whole day without talking to me, so that must mean you for the streets and you're not with me. It's an issue. And so there's not enough spaces like this created, which is why there's no sense of urgency in that space, man.
Let's just understand this in a larger scope.
Sure.
Man, we talk about how she came at this and where this stuff may have come from someone else, where
Yes.
this pain, these feelings or whatnot. Let's just ask this question. What would you do? You already know. You already know.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
What I would do is first get an understanding. Especially if I know, and this comes a lot with understanding who I am, whose image I reflect, the character that I walk in and that I live in. Okay. So I am assured of that. So because of that, I'm able to walk into spaces like this. And the first thing I'm looking to do is get an understanding. Solomon tells us this, for all you Bible nerds, with all you're getting, get an understanding. And so I think this is a space where we have an opportunity to get an understanding. So I'm asking questions. I'm moving in curiosity. I'm not looking to judge, nor am I looking to force someone who may be in this position with me to see things the way I do, so that way this can work out, because you may not be there yet. So instead, I just want to move in curiosity and ask questions. And I think that the more questions I ask, the more opportunity I have to really get what's behind the scenes. A lot of the stuff that we see bubble up on the surface as humans, there's a root behind it that is due to past experiences that is causing them to move this way, from places of uncertainty, unsurety, places of doubt and hesitancy, places of fear and anxiety. And it's due to previous people they've encountered. So they're coming into this space not really expecting much. So when you supersede those expectations that they've been looking for, they don't know how to respond, because they not only were they not expecting it, but because of past relationships and experiences, they have no reason to expect it. So when it happens, that's when it clicks. So for me, I first want to move out of space of getting to understand why this is, where is this coming from, and then move in a place of reassurance and being okay to constantly reassure where I'm at, where my thinking is, so you're never lost in this arena that we're in. I think one of the goofiest things that we do in this culture today is ghost people. I've been ghosted, and I'll admit I've done some of it, but it's goofy. It's so goofy, because this is the stuff that that resonates with people a lot, because they don't know what went wrong. So you're leaving them in the dark. They have no clarity behind what went wrong and how things could have went differently. And you may have your opinions. Hey, well, I'm mature enough to not need clarity. Well, listen, if you have an opportunity to go get it, you go get it. Right. You do in some instances.
Yeah, for sure.
You know what I'm saying? So I think there's just a lot of that resonated in there, man. So I would look to get an understanding and ask questions, move in curiosity, and reassure where I'm at, so they're not left in the dark.
You said, I'm going to ask questions and get clarity. Why do you think people are afraid then to go down this route, to ask the questions and to get clarity? Is it because they might hear something that they didn't want to hear?
True.
Why do you think that is?
Yeah, I think that's actually a huge part, because there is something that they may not think that they're ready to hear. I've been down that road, and I completely understand that. I think you definitely need to be in the space, if you are going to get clarity, to be accepting of whatever is said. Okay, I do think that that's necessary. And if you're not ready for that, then make your decision, move in wisdom, and discern what's the best decision for you. Absolutely. But I also think that there are some people that aren't willing to go down that path because they are uncomfortable with the upfrontness required to get it. You know what I mean? So they're more willing to just let things float in the air and let it be what it's going to be, instead of acknowledging that this is confusing. This is somewhat hurtful. I'm somewhat lost in trying to figure out where all this is coming from. And there's this loss of aspect that relationships need work. I think there's an expectation on a lot of people that we're trying to put on early stages of relationships. We're trying to put an expectation that when we enter this talking stage, I need to hear from you every day. I need a good morning, good night text. I need all these expectations, all of them. You name it, it's there. Instead of being understanding of where this person currently is, where they're coming from, and what you could do to accommodate them, help them through that struggle or overcoming that issue, reassuring your position, not playing with their heart, like we talked about before in previous podcasts, and being genuine in your approach to them. So I think there's a plethora of reasons. You want to leave it up in the air. You're afraid of what you might hear. You're not comfortable with the confrontation. Maybe you were never really even genuine. That's possible too. You're kind of seeing how serious it's getting. And so you really weren't looking for that deep of a commitment. And so now that that's happened, you might be someone who's like, well, I'm kind of thankful because I really wasn't trying to go that deep. But that, I think, is a reflection of your heart too, because if you weren't, why did you even approach? So thoughts like that too.
You said another thing in that conversation, and what you said was, you said that not only should you dive deeper into the questions, but then you're not trying to make that person be where you are. But does our current culture and society support that as a way to be healthy and effective in a relationship? Does our current setup support that?
Yo, listen, I've got something amazing in the works for you, available right now. If you're somebody who's looking to make this year your best year yet at diving into your faith and allowing it to become more applicable in your life. Never known where to start. You've always been confused. It feels overwhelming. Maybe you feel you don't have time. You don't know how to apply the Bible into your life. You have so many questions and thoughts as to what makes sense. How does it make sense? Don't worry, your boy's got you covered with the Faith Factory. Click the link down in the description below and go be great. No, I'm actually, and here's a good example. I'm actually looking at the comments of the same video that we played. This individual said, "Not gonna lie, this is so stupid. Imagine telling your partner you almost walked away." Laughing emoji. Buddy was shook. So off that comment alone, along with so many others that are potentially in here, I would say no. It's very countercultural, but here's why: because there's this message of how individuals should love. There's a lot of prescriptions being thrown out there to
Mm,
people as to
mm.
how they should love, and because of the influence of the individual that it comes from, many people are like, "Well, this must be right because look at what they have." Look at the influence they have, look at the women they're around, look at the all this other kind of stuff. And so we don't take a second to ask ourselves, well, is this true? Is this beneficial? Is this optimal to the way society is designed to move? What about the standard of God? How does this fall underneath all of that? And so I don't think culture aligns with this, because as soon as you start putting yourself in these positions to understand somebody, the culture looks at it as they're wasting your time. You know, you need to protect yourself, you need to protect your heart, because they're abusing you. They are doing all these other kinds of things. That's how they'll describe somebody who is in a similar position as this. They want it, but there's a lot of stuff that's happened to them that's keeping them from really embracing it. And so instead of understanding, they expect you to walk away, not because they want you to, but they just expect you to,
Mm.
because that's what everybody else is doing. So the culture will call you a simp. The culture will call you a munch. The culture will say that you're a beta. The culture will say that you're putting yourself to, you're just doing too much. She don't even really mess with you like that. He don't even really mess with you like that. You need to find somebody that's worth more your time, who's wanting to reciprocate what you give, because you deserve it, king. You deserve it, queen. Yes, right. They do all that. They do all that. That's what culture feeds you. Because if you don't get what you want, when you want it, how you want it right now, then that means they were never interested, don't care, and you need to move on. But the problem is we don't take time to consider why they're moving like that. Why are they responding like that?
So what you're saying, and for those of you who don't know, I met Sean about 3 years ago, and we just connected. And so Sean's a different dude. He's moving on a different level with some stuff. This is like some grown man stuff right here, because a lot of you who may see this and listen to this, specifically his content that he puts out from this is a hard thing for you. You're listening, and for some people like me, I'm 53, but and for some people like me, you're like, oh man, I ain't got time for that. But what do you have time for? So this whole, you've heard the saying, fools rush in, and there's some value to that, because when you rush into anything, you're not getting the full context, you're not getting the full oversight, you're not getting everything that you need in order to make really good, healthy, sound decisions regarding that. And this sounds like this is an opportunity for somebody to do that. And I also wonder why, Sean, we don't want to have conversations with people who will be honest with us about where they were. I wonder if we're just not offended and more short-sighted with someone's truth, right, about where they might currently stand. Because if you want that relationship, the question becomes is, have that relationship, but why are you so offended at them telling the truth? Because you want people to hear your truth. Like if you're not ready for something or prepared for something, you absolutely positively want somebody to be like, oh, okay, I feel you on that. No, I'll feel you. I got you. You would want that. But then we don't want to have that level of conversation with people. We don't want people to have that with us. I would submit to you that those of you who are listening, that many of you would be in a much better place if you were willing to be patient, take your time, listen, hear from things, and walk out some things and stick and stay with some things for a little while, just to see what they could be. Now, there comes a time where you have to say, okay, I've seen enough, and you move on. That's okay too. But I think that we might benefit from that. Now, Sean, you talked about simps, which I've been called before.
Same.
Yes, I've been called a simp before, and that's and maybe the person was even using it in the wrong context. But I love my wife. I love my kids. They're my priority. That's who I am. I do everything to make sure that my wife is comfortable. I just do. And I think that people struggle with that. Even being married for the length of time that I have. You know, I'm just that guy. I wash clothes, I dust, I mop, I clean up. But you know, I don't do that for my wife. I do that because that's how I was raised. I was raised by my grandmother and my mother. And so that was how I was raised. That's this truthfully, people look at that as simping, but I've never not done that. I like cleanliness. I like clean lines. I like very minimal things. And I like stuff to be clean. Has nothing to do with who I'm married to, has everything to do, but she benefits from that because there's some things that she doesn't have to do. My schedule has always been more flexible than hers, but it's been termed simping. Somebody told me, you know, that man, don't you think that's kind of, and I'm like, no, that's me taking care of my stuff. So the ideal of whether you're an alpha or what'd you say the other one was? Munch.
Yep, alpha.
What is
Yeah,
a munch?
man, Munch is low key a New York term, I think, that people started walking around with, and it was in the same direction as being called a simp. So I'm not going to use the whole language here,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I hopefully y'all can pick it up. This first one, about 3,988 likes on it in agreement, says a munch is someone whose only use is eating, you know, vaginal, right,
Mhm.
without getting anything in return. Or a super simp who does anything for a girl off the thought that she is feeling him. Okay, this is real. So again, people are considering you in context in this direction, along with a simp, along with a super simp. This idea that you're just in your feelings, in your emotions, you're willing to do anything and everything for somebody, and they don't give nothing in return. But I have this thought, and maybe they may not have considered, and maybe they did, maybe they would have, in terms of the munch, you know, but we see the actual definition, so maybe not that deep. But I wonder if culture today would consider Jesus a simp.
Yes.
Because we love him, John says, because he first loved us. So
Bruh.
here's the thing. Here's the thing, man. When you talk about the offense, when you mentioned that offense earlier, that selfishness is at the root of that. You put yourself at the center and you make it all about you, but that comes from a place of not getting the understanding that's necessary for you to navigate through it and
Yeah.
say, okay, well, I don't really understand why this isn't being reciprocated maybe the way I want it to or the way I think it should. So
Yeah.
that's some selfishness that you have to deal with, some ego you got to lay down, because in this process of getting to know somebody and building a long-term relationship with someone, you have to be willing to put in the work early. Like, we just think we're going to get into the marriage or get into what we think is going to happen in the long run and just flip the switch. No work involved, nothing built up to it. We just going to flip the switch. You got to get into a place in the beginning stages of being willing to address what is it that's offending you? Why am I taking this so seriously or offensive to myself,
Yeah.
instead of trying to move in curiosity? And patience, man. Again, they're going to call you this, but I think the same people that are using this terminology, such as a simp, a munch, so on and so forth, beta, calling you, trying to label you into an alpha, beta, sigma, whatever. All these people are, a lot of these people, I won't say all, but a lot of these people are speaking from places of hurt. They've been hurt by people that they tried to love. They genuinely wanted to move in love towards somebody. They got hurt, and they haven't dealt with that in a healthy manner to be able to see clearly what they're prescribing to other people. Fresh and Fit, y'all know who I'm talking about. Fresh and Fit, God rest his soul, Kevin Samuels is of the world. Okay. Rollo Tomasi, who considers himself a godfather of the manosphere and red pill. These are individuals who are leading men, who have led men into this idea that they need to get their game up and be aware. And I agree that they need to be aware of what's taking place in a certain type of women, but this is not all women who move this way. And so as a result, you're creating a narrative that doesn't create the opportunity to investigate scenarios like we're talking about in this time, because these conversations are necessary. Because what if she isn't one of the girls from the streets that you're used to encountering? What if we stop yelling bros before hoes on the top of our lungs and start acknowledging the woman we've encountered and just raise the question, what if she ain't a hoe though? Like, I'm just curious, like, what if she really ain't that?
Yeah.
You know, well, so it's just there's not enough curiosity there, man. And so we look for early exits instead of being patient, trying to understand. And that's where the problem lies.
Let me say this, because we only got a few more minutes here. So let me say this. I want to present this to you, and you can talk about it here for a minute.
Sure.
I'm so sick of hearing about labels. I'm so sick of hearing about simps, red pills, blue pills, now this whole Munch thing, now alpha, beta, all this other kind of good stuff. First of all, I'm going to be honest with you. I believe that there are men who move in alpha. I believe that there are men who move in beta. I believe that there are men who move between simp and whatever you want to call it. I don't think that any of that actually needs to be labeled anything except for being a human being. I think there's a time for you to respond as an alpha when it comes to something that you have to protect in your family, right? In your relationship. And there's a time where I think that you have to, quote, be somebody who's a simp, if you will, when you're taking care of your spouse, the woman that you love. And you're saying at the hint of her needing something, I'm making myself available to that. I don't see anything wrong with that, quite frankly. And if we're going to go scriptural, if we go scriptural, the Bible says this. The Bible says, husbands, love your wives. That's what it says. It doesn't, there's no label attached to it. It's so there's no, and oh, let me throw this in here, because I was going to say this while I was listening to you. Love hurts, because to truly love is to be vulnerable, which means that you are always open to being hurt. And so if you cannot ever pass that, and you always struggle with that, you're never going to be able to love. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to give somebody a little bit, but then you'll always be having a reserve so that the fall, if it occurs, doesn't shatter you or break you. So you won't truly be engaged. You'll only be engaged to a certain level, knowing that that's the only way that you feel like you can move. So I get it, but I don't believe in all of these titles, man. I believe that if you label somebody something, that's the only way that you see them. You can't really appreciate them. That specifically goes for women. But now let me talk to the men. When you say that about somebody, when you say that about another man, you basically are saying that the way you roll, the way you move, your movement is better than the other man's movement. See, I don't feel like mine is better. I feel like this is just the way that I'm wired. This is the way I'm put together. I'm put together to take care of the women in my life. That includes my daughters. That includes my granddaughters. I'm wired to do that. So I don't have time, Sean, to be running around trying to figure out why somebody thinks I'm this, that, or the other, and getting caught up in all of these labels. These labels are tearing down men's ability to be what they need to be in relationships at any given time, any given moment. And if you're rigid and inflexible, because there's a time for those of you who say I'm an alpha male, that ain't working on certain people. I'm gonna be honest with you. It's not working. And there's not a time, you can't simp for every woman, because every woman ain't your woman. Man, I wish we had time to go further into this. Every woman is not your woman, so you can't simp for every woman. But I don't even see that as being a problem. Now, if you're out there, you putting yourself out there, you're being wild, you kind of wilding out, you don't really have a focus and a purpose, and you just run around doing all kinds of crazy stuff or whatever, get yourself together, get yourself some friends, get yourself some accountability people, let them help you out. But in general, Sean, that's not how I see it. In general, I think these labels are detrimental. I think that our culture has bought into these ideals and these thoughts. And I think that they're systematically tearing down men and relationships, because everybody now is approaching that relationship with the title and not with the intent of what we started as we heard this video and the stuff that you've expounded on, which is to ask the question, who are we as people? What's going on in your life? You don't even know their history. You just give them a label without understanding why they move the way that they move. And now you're like, oh, well, this, that, and the third. No. You don't even understand. They don't even understand you. You didn't even get to know the person. You decided who they were up front. Is there some tricksters out there? Are there some people out there who are moving wrong? Yeah, but you have enough common sense, I believe you do, if you're listening to this, to know when something doesn't sit right with you. You just be like, man, no, that just don't sit right with me. And especially if you're a believer, you got to have the spirit of wisdom and discernment on your life that's teaching you, like, hey, spiritually speaking, this doesn't match for me. God's giving you that ability. If you're connected to him, like you say you are, then you would know, hey, this ain't a place I need to be moving. But that's what I have on that, man. So
Yeah, I love it.
do some
I
final
I
thoughts
love
on
it.
this here.
Absolutely. I love it, man. Everything you said was fire. I'll address these few things, okay? Because I want you to understand, especially from the definition that we just read of what a munch is. I'll prescribe this to you from a biblical worldview. You shouldn't even find yourself in a position to be labeled as such according to this definition. But let me tell you why. Because your value is worth more than a one-night stand and then being called a munch as a response. This idea that like this whole idea of people getting access to you in such a way, the deepest part of you physically, they're getting access to you that way, and you're not married. That you shouldn't even be finding yourself in that position from a biblical worldview, right? So people who would consider you a munch in this regard, and that's not even a life you would live. Of course you would decline being called such, because my value is too high to just be willing to give myself over to you in bed, to fill a void that this temporal feeling does not fill. Right. So I'll leave that there. Right. Because again, we're on y'all. I hope and the audience that's listening to this, maybe you're on TikTok as much as I am. You're on social media as much as I am. Like, let's not act like these narratives aren't around. Right. And these narratives aren't what they are. There are people literally walking around declaring themselves to be this or calling others this. But instead of putting a labeling on them, because I agree with Demetrius here, man, when you put a label on somebody prior to meeting them, you've already limited in your mind what they could possibly be.
You did.
So instead, you labeled them as a simp. And so now your entire framework, ideology, philosophy is going towards not really trying to understand why they move the way they do, where do they come from, what's their history, what's their background, and instead you just keep them in that labeling. And so you're limiting yourself from being able to see what is really here. What is really here? Because if we're being honest, there are a lot of people, the same people that are rushing to label other people in these categories are the same people that are looking for love. Are looking for a love that will cater to the issues that they're dealing with. They're looking for that love, but their emotional response is to label you as a munch, as a simp, as a this and that, because a lot of that is coming from fear, because they don't want to experience what they've experienced before, and they'll do anything, even if that means pushing you away by labeling you such. So they don't have to deal with some issues that are present in their life and in their heart. So as the individual that is giving this love, okay, please recognize that there is a standard to this love. There is a standard that we are deriving this love from, and that we're called to move forward in. Okay, I am not a fan, along with PD, of alphas, betas, sigmas, because we are getting away from really trying to understand people, who they are, where they come from, and why they respond the way they do. Not even looking to change you. I just need to understand, so that way I could better assess how I need to go about this. Do I want to stay? Do I not want to stay? But communicate that and make sense of that, man. So there's a standard to these things, the way we live, the way we do things, the way we approach others. And right now, culture is just at a war. Men and women are at war with one another. And when I look at the biblical worldview and the precedents of such, man and woman are not to be at war with one another.
Nope.
We are to complement one another. We are to 100%. Do and move in this life together with one another. And so I don't want, my biggest encouragement in this whole entire podcast, because of the video that we opened up with, I think we need to be slow to labeling somebody as a cultural term. Who knows, in 10 years, it might be a new term. In 2 years, it might be a different term. Instead of labeling people and such and rushing to that, I want you to become quicker to understanding. I want you to become quicker to being patient. I want you to become quicker to willingly wanting to see things through. Don't date them all. Don't sleep with them all. Don't talk to them all. I just want you to get into a position where you are willing to commit to getting to know somebody instead of labeling them in such a place that limits you from being able to see who they are. I know that there's statistics out there. I know that there's a certain type of woman out there. We're not blind. We see that, but not everybody fits that mold. And I promise you, for me personally, if I didn't have the resources, the counseling, the biblical worldview, scripture, all that stuff to navigate through this culture today, I would have people like Fresh and Fit in my ear who are telling me that half of the nuclear family, speaking of the woman, is where all the issues lie, and it's causing men to readjust. I would be lost for words. So I would miss out on a potential gem because I'm thinking, oh, she's up to no good. She's trying to do me dirty. And so I'm moving with a dog eat dog mentality and moving from fear instead of moving from a sound mind, transformed mind, and love that is breathed through Christ, his word, and the Holy Spirit.
Man.
So I have to be able to see these things, man. And just, we got to remove from labelings, and we have to get to the truth and get to a space of willingly understanding people, because it's harder to hate people up close. Man. When I get an understanding of you, I don't want to label you as anything. I just want to hear your heart. And when I can do that, spaces like that, that relationship is not only healthy, but it's something you're looking for, your heart craves for, and you're willing to do the work to maintain. So man, I'm done.
So we're going to wrap up. It takes, first of all, that was ridiculously good. It takes an incredibly mature, humble, contrite, self-aware individual to be able to do the stuff that Sean and I talked about here today when it comes to relationships. Now, granted, if you hear us and you like, they both Sims, I don't have nothing to do with it. Okay. But if what we're doing is working and what you're doing isn't, and you out there constantly in a struggle, in a battle, then you go ahead. You keep going. And for the ladies out there, I want to highly recommend, especially to my Christian brothers and sisters, I have to highly recommend that you get away from these cultural terms and you put your face, your eyes, and your heart in your Bible. Read Ephesians chapter number 4 if you want to understand the roles of men and women and how God designed it. Because when you don't do it how God designed it, then you're fighting the design. You're not fighting the man or the woman. You're fighting the actual design, and that's what the problem is. So I want to make sure that you're clear on that. I did a whole teaching series on that years ago. It was one of my best selling messages, was fighting the design, because God has designed things a certain way, and we've come in and tried to fight it and then wonder why things don't work, because you're fighting how God designed it. Stop fighting the design.